This was the book talk station at my local Barnes & Noble. I've never read a single one of these books, but why do I have a terrifying feeling that every single one includes an extremely detailed description of certain activities? I heard like an audio book recording of this book right here, the one that looks like a children's coloring book with people playing hockey on it.
I work at a school, and a 4th grader brought this book.
Now they've moved on to the Twilight series. And I'm just like, okay, like the first ones are okay. Do your parents know you're reading this though?
Ooh, wow, okay, so this video is not a video essay. I'm taking a feather out of Khadijah's cap because I wanted to discuss a few of the TikTok discourses going around, and I didn't feel like making a different video for all of them because in a lot of ways they have enough intersections that make them worthy of just one video. So we are going to discuss shipping, media literacy, and smut. Things it feels like I've been talking about online for most of my life, but let's just keep doing it. I even brought out the Nuance Mug. Hi, I'm Princess. I do this online. I'm trying to be better about making content that just makes me happy and not just chasing algorithms that don't always serve me. So let's start off with media literacy. There are a lot of ways media literacy has come up in pop culture and film and TV, all the kind of good analysis. But I think if I want to tie it all together for this particular video, a good focus point would be the recent film Poor Things. I ended up seeing Poor Things in theaters. It wasn't for me. I thought Emma Stone was really good at it, but I still wasn't rooting for her to win the Oscar. Mark Ruffalo reminded us of his thrust game for those of us who forgot or may have forgotten from the way he was wrecking Julianne Moore in The Kids Were All Right. So, you know, you got it, Ruffles. You got it. The movie was beautifully made, well acted, overall funny for the most part, but that being said, the message and how the storyline deconstructed the trope of the born sexy yesterday as coined by pop culture detective has been divisive amongst people who watched the film. For some, it was an effective way of showing how silly and ridiculous the trope is, making the men look foolish and childish. It showed that through Bella, that her not being raised in a strict socially patriarchal way and being given the freedom to explore her impulses with the wonder of a child while in an adult body allowed her to become this emotionally and sexually independent person.
My heart has been a bit dim on your weepy, sweary person lately.
For others like myself, the subversion didn't go far enough. It seemed like they were trying to have like your cake and eat it too. Like Bella is still made to be this exceptional person, even though her existence is a dual violation of a core autonomy, one that Godwin or God never has to fully deal with, and her sexual liberation just felt very juvenile and not distant enough from the male gaze to make it interesting, especially since queer exploration doesn't even really show up until the very end, and I found that in itself to feel kind of lazy. I also think the film went on for like 25 minutes too long, but still, it was a well-made, engaging film, and I think I would rather have films that are this prestige be good conversation pieces than just be dry, meaningless entertainment.
Oh, nice. Tux.
I think these are good arguments and things to discuss about a movie like this, especially one that apparently goes really far away from the source material in terms of its conclusion. I haven't read the book. I'm not planning to anytime soon because my reading list is too long right now. But having separate opinions and different takeaways from a film about the effectiveness of filmmaking is not inherently a media literacy problem. Watching a movie is a layered experience. Everything can impact it. I remember watching The Hateful Eight at a mostly white theater with my brother, and while we were certainly not enjoying the movie beforehand, the part where Samuel L. Jackson monologues about having a Confederate soldier give him a blowjob made like the mostly white audience roar with laughter, and it was very unsettling to my brother and I, who were just like blinking in black confusion the entire time. And even in that film, I remember there being this argument that if you thought some of the gender violence in the film was bad, you didn't get the movie or the point it was trying to make. And I did get it. They were trying to say that she was an evil person that was just as dangerous as any of the men, but the storytelling didn't tell that well. We were being told that by the characters and by Tarantino himself, but we never see her do anything that made the abuse that she was getting seem valid. We've gotten a bunch of films like this, from American Fiction to Oppenheimer to Past Lives to Saltburn, where people are coming in from different perspectives, reacting differently to films. I really loved Past Lives, but I have yet to meet an Asian person who enjoyed that movie. Saltburn Discourse has been my favorite queer on queer roasting fest. Like, the girls are fighting in every way and it's just delicious. Like, I went to I think it was called Hello Kiko or Hi Kiko show, and they had a whole little roasting of Saltburn, and I was like, just out there, I was like, this is fabulous. To me, a lack of media literacy is when a moral or theme needs to be explained to you even clearer because you don't understand subtext, or where you only see the superficial element of the story and not what goes on deeper behind it. For example, I would argue that people who watch Succession and think that Siobhan is a heroic figure or a feminist figure fail at media literacy, because at every turn it is proven that she is just as much of an agent of the system as the rest of her family. She just has all the superficial trappings of liberal feminism to make her somewhat more relatable and closer to the marginalized perspective. But the show is explicit in showing that she only uses it for her own benefit. She is doing things that will make her be more elevated in a company that is inherently doing shady, right-wing things anyway.
I want to clean up. I need it all out there.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I do.
I want the Houston story to come out. How she went overboard.
Normal people, they will doubt you.
Your life is gonna get ripped apart.
For 2 or 3 days, you're going to be kind of famous. But then the caravan moves on.
Oversimplifying things or crafting a narrative around it to justify their dislike of it that isn't rooted in what the film actually is saying or doing. Going back to Poor Things, I have seen a few takes that the movie is porn and pro-Pedialyte. To start in reverse order, the Born Sexy Yesterday trope was broken down and crafted really well by Pop Culture Detective ages ago. But essentially it is the idea of a character that exists in the shape of a woman, or is a woman, that has the body of an adult but is functionally a child. Childlike interest, childlike personality, which is usually tied to these concepts of goodness or innocence. The character is also usually just a love interest to a male character. Bella is a subversion of this, and also the book predates this trope being examined, but obviously, they would be aware of it. But anyway, Bella is a subversion of that because she is the main character, and all of this exploration, even the sex, is about her learning to understand the world and her place in it for her on her terms. She is not a full-on pixie dream girl, and she literally ruins Mark Ruffalo's character's life, as he deserves. He's a bad guy, but there's also elements of her being violent and cruel and petty. There's a scene where she gets another character to kill a frog in their bare hands.
Kill it.
What?
Her innocence is there, but it's not like a childlike whimsy where there's nothing there to it. She is also violent and impulsive. It's not just, oh, cute, whatever. Her innocence is there to intrigue, but she's not meant to stay there. She has the brain of a baby at first, but babies grow and evolve very quickly, especially because part of what they learn at first is motor skills, and because she is an adult, clearly she's got an adult body, there's a better understanding of those things. She also doesn't fall in love with the first man she meets or the second, or really does any of the things that a traditional character who fits that role would do. What makes the argument really off, and I feel this is important to state, is that Bella is not physically a child. Duncan, who's Ruffalo's character, does not know she has a child's brain. He's attracted to her strangeness, this princess in a tower kind of vibe that she has, who seems pliant for sexual activity that he can shape, only to find out that he cannot at all control her. And that is why she fails at being a Born Sexy Yesterday complete character. The film is not an endorsement of dating children, because Bella is not perceived to be a child by anyone that we see her sleep with. And it's not just a poor criticism of the movie, but it's also worded in the most inflammatory way that shuts down any conversation about it. In a work where there clearly is room for that nuance to say, Mug. And I also say this as someone who does not like the movie, who does not think that it does all these things the best way it could. I think it has a lot of failings, but I do not think at any point it is promoting Pedialyte anything because Pedialytia, whatever they want to call it. At no point is it ever endorsing that or putting that perspective as the right one. There is always this discomfort because in the early times of her development, but that's why we don't get it at that very point in the film. Now let's go on to the allegation that the film is porn, which will be a good segue to the next part of the video. If Poor Things is porn, then it's very bad porn. Porn is meant to be sexually arousing, which I would argue the sex scenes in this movie are not because they're so over the top. They also don't linger or focus on penetration, which is key. They're not having actual sex, which is also a part. Porn is actual people having sex. There's no liquids, there's no moisture. Showing a lot of boobs and ass and pubes is not a porn maketh. Although shout out to that Merkin. It was doing a lot of work. We love to see a Merkin out there in business. But let's just say for a second that it is porn or porn adjacent. Okay, what about it? In that case, it's probably the most ethical porn you've ever seen. Emma Stone produced it. She got an Oscar out of it. Everyone involved got paid. There was an intimacy coordinator. And going back to Emma Stone, at this point in her career, she already has an Oscar. She's a respected name in the industry. She had full autonomy when it came to making this movie. So she wasn't pressured, and she's not some young up-and-comer who wouldn't be able to say no. Like, if this is porn, then this is the new gold standard, baby. Like, this should be what all porn should be. Calling it porn is meant to denigrate its sexuality, to say that that the sex in it has no purpose or meaning or artistic merit. And I'll say even this, porn can be artistic. And I know that the porn wars have been a part of feminist discourse for ages. I've been listening to Broe Deschanel's co-hosted Rehash podcast on this topic, which has been really interesting. And my own feelings about porn are consistently growing because I get the feminist argument against it, but I also sometimes feel like we should just maybe focus on helping sex workers feel safe. And I also don't think that all porn needs to inherently be negative. It's all but stuff. That's what the thing is about anyway. But calling it porn is a way of dismissing the artistry and the way in which sex is used in this movie to tell a larger thing by saying, oh, anytime you have characters having sex in a work like this, that just inherently makes it porn. And that is not, in my opinion, a fair or good criticism. And to me, when I see a movie, even a movie I don't love, that is focusing on a female character's exploration of identity, that focuses on her navigating her own sexual pleasure being like reduced to just porn, it is an indicator in my mind of how we have begun to lose our understanding about sex and sex scenes in terms of what they mean narratively. And this way of using terms like porn and smut to reduce the way some people do want to see that kind of connection in works, in films, and in books. This video is sponsored by Nebula. Nebula is the creator-owned and co-run streaming service that brings you some of your favorite content from across the internet. We know that with all of the streaming services out there, starting and sticking with Nebula is a commitment, and we are dedicated to continuing to allow it to grow and continue to be a source of entertainment for you all. Behind the scenes, Nebula is changing and evolving to deliver the best of what you love. It'll be even easier now with the new updates to find content from new and existing creators on the platform. The site has also added categories to help make it more user-friendly. Those categories are news, culture, science, history, podcasts, and classes, with the news category being run by the TLDR news team to maintain some journalistic integrity. You'll be able to find all the videos relevant to your interests in one area. There'll also be a new slate of Nebula originals that are a mix of sketch comedy, documentaries, 2 films, and several projects still in development. These will be creator-built projects that couldn't happen anywhere else but Nebula. And that's in addition to the videos you can see earlier, extended and uncut on the service from many creators, including my own work. Right now, after watching Masters of Air, I went back and watched Real Time History's work, the Red Adams Nebula original. I am constantly in awe at the work my peers are able to do. If you sign up using my link at nebula.tv/princessweeks or use the link below, you can support me directly and get Nebula for 40% off annual plans, as little as $2.50 a month. Thank you guys so much for watching and supporting Nebula, and please enjoy the rest of the video.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. Publish more non-spicy books.
I guess I should start out by saying that I actually enjoy spicy, to use that term, romance books. I read a lot of them. I just finally got a physical copy of Kathy Ardley's Role Playing, which is a really good romance between two people in their 40s. The guy is demisexual and bi, which female character is a 48-year-old single mother who is just trying to play video games and chill. I like romance novels in general. I had a lot of biases against them when I was younger, when I would see, women coming with all of these mass markets and just being like, oh my God, whatever. But I grew up, got educated, and I've come to really, really enjoy it. And when I'm feeling really depressed or like really going through a bad period, there's something very soothing about seeing how an author can craft a really engaging drama between two people in like just over 300 pages. I'm glad that I've outgrown my sexist and misogynistic inclinations. TikTok, like much of social media, is driven by algorithms. Therefore, if a topic is popular and gets a lot of interactions, it will create more like it and show it in front of your eyeballs. So right now, with whatever TikTok's book of the month is popular, you are likely to see it. And even though I say like you need to diversify your feeds and all that kind of stuff, and there is a such thing as like handling the algorithm, I will also say that TikTok is not always great about allowing you to get rid of certain tags and stuff the way it was on Tumblr. On Tumblr, back in my day, if you didn't want to see certain things, you could just tag it out. And, even sometimes there are creators that I like, but they talk about things I'm not interested in. I can't even there's no way for me to just mute those things. I have to full out block them. And that's a two-step thing, and I don't really want to do that all the time. All that being said, there has been a lot of discourse about sex in romance books across different subgenres of romance. Now, let's be frank and say that there has always been sex in romance novels, maybe not always as explicit, but that's a part of the vibe. That isn't new. Romance has also always been the backbone of the publishing industry, led in fact by women. That is also not new. What is new is people wanting to profit and create engagement with its popularity on a whole new medium that is trying to engage you for over a minute, trying to, get you always in their eyeballs organically, and knows that there's an audience that is looking for that, especially because there has been a lack of being able to find romance and sex in other media. Sex in movies and television has been going away, in large part because of the abuses that have happened in the industry, and we're still kind of dealing with how to navigate that kind of intimacy. Plus, I think, like anything, if actors feel uncomfortable with it, there are ways to show intimacy and sensuality without nudity. Julia Roberts has mastered that. You never seen Julia Roberts' titty, and you never going to, baby. People my age and in the millennial group have noted how much more conservative younger generations have communicated about sex on screen in other works, which has been somewhat alarming, not because we can have a conversation about how smut and spicy books have become marketing tools that have got out of hand and sometimes have not known how to do that for different genres, especially YA. But because a lot of the people who are criticizing this also end up repeating some of the same reactionary stuff that we see happen with music, video games, and film, it has become really alarming because it seems that there is no understanding that the censorship that they are trying to have will have trickle-down effects that they are not thinking of. I saw one TikToker say they wanted to have a ratings system on books like they do on video games and movies. And it's just the way rating systems work, especially with film, is already flawed and problematic. I do get to a certain degree that the way book covers are right now, it can be hard for some people to tell by the cover if it's for teens or adults, but you can always just read the back of the book. I work at a bookstore in Brooklyn on the weekends now, part-time, and one day this father comes in with his daughter. I think she's probably 8 or 9, you know, maybe 10 years old, and they pick up a book that's on our like kind of genre table, and he brings it to the desk, and I look at it and I'm like, are you getting this for her? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, um, are you sure? He's like, yeah, it was on the YA table. I'm like, that's not a YA book. That's first of all, that's not a YA table. That is a genre fiction table. And it says that it has sci-fi, fantasy, and some YA because it's all in that one section. And he's like, well, we looked through it a little bit. And I'm just like, okay. Because if he read the back cover, it talks about a woman in her 20s getting drunk. So I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if you really look through it thoroughly. But at the same time, I'm not a parent, right? But I have been a child. And so part of me was like, you know, I'm trying to do my due diligence and be like, just so you know, just so you know. But I'm also like, if the kid's gonna read it, I'm like, if you got away with it, girl, that's also that's your shit. Because teens are gonna find dirty content, sex content anyway. I read on fanfiction.net when I was younger. It's not hard. I remember when I was really into Anne Rice, I went to the Berlin Public Library and I was looking for Anne Rice books, and I found the Claiming a Sleeping Beauty, the second book in it, and I thought, oh, I'll just pick it up. It's Anne Rice. And then I go and start reading it at like 14, 15, and it's like hardcore erotica, like hardcore BDSM erotica. Okay, and I was just like, I shouldn't be reading this. I finished it, but then I brought it straight back very secretly. And it wasn't questioned, because I think also when you are a young person who reads, people are so excited that you're reading books that they just kind of like, if they don't have any sort of like, if they're not really paying attention, they're not really going to be aggressive about it. Especially because like with Anne Rice, yes, there's sex in her books, but like the sex in her erotica series is not at all what you get in the Sex and the Vampire Chronicles. So like if you had read one, you're like, you would not have thought that it would have been the same energy. But again, like I just got it from the library. And to me, as someone who very much remembers sex and the anxiety around it as a teenager, the thing that was the biggest hindrance to me is the lack of feeling a safe space to discuss it with my parent. And if you don't create spaces to discuss sex with your kids, when it comes up, you create problems with them being able to communicate their needs to you and to communicate what they're feeling about intimacy. And I also feel like, and this is brought up all the time, we have so much anxiety about talking to children about sex, yet they are exposed to violence every single day, or exposed to sort of like very violent realities every single day. I mean, like in America, we have to prepare our children for the threat of gun violence. And yet this is what I understand why it's a big deal. If I was a parent, you know, I would like be like, you shouldn't be reading, but I also reduce what my child is reading. Like, you know, it's like you have to do your due diligence. Like the main book that gets called out for this is Icebreaker, which I have read. I also read the sequel, wait for the third one to come out. Icebreaker is about these two, one, her name is Anastasia, they call her Stassi. I can't make any allowances for that. And this other guy, I forget his name. One, she's a figure skater. He plays hockey. The rink for the ice skaters gets ruined in some kind of hazing prank. And so the ice skaters and the hockey players have to like train together, and they end up like having a whole like, you know, will they, won't they, but they will, and it happens pretty quickly. And it's you know, it's a fun read. I enjoy it. I really liked it. I like the characters. I had a good time reading it. But it is very much for adults. They're in their 20s, they're in college. When I think about the discourse around Icebreaker, having read it and knowing how smutty it is, because it is very spicy. They are fucking, okay? When I hear about the anxiety around this book specifically, I do happen to think like, okay, if a teenager or a 12-year-old reads Icebreaker, what is the worst thing that could happen? They read a book about two adults having consensual sex that is full of reciprocity, a story about a girl unlearning, dealing with an eating disorder and a toxic friendship, a guy who figures out that he can't always, you know, punch his way out of solutions, you know, a relationship that becomes a true partnership between two equal people, you know. The series is not racist. It's not homophobic. I believe there's a bisexual male character. It's very clear on consent. It has two ambitious people balancing life, love, while in college, having healthy sex lives. That's the worst thing. That is the worst thing that a child who reads Icebreaker will see. And I get it. You don't want them to read about like explicit sex. I understand that. But explicit sex is the least dangerous thing that they're going to consume in that kind of format, because they can't see it and they won't have any concept of what they're talking about. Like, as someone who read smutty stuff before I understood what sex was, it doesn't really click. It is astounding to me that this book is the book that people use as an example of why that we should bring really potential censorship issues to books. I think it's really important for people to understand that putting that kind of labeling power is going to be inherently problematic, because do you know what's going to happen? The conservatives who call any book with queer rep pornography, who have been chomping at the bit to remove important texts from queer and BIPOC writers about their experiences, about the lived harsh realities of sex and gender and dating and all those things, are going to use this new ability to mark these books and age them and put them in certain age things to keep queer and Black titles out of the hands of children. That's what's going to happen, because that's what always happens. They use labeling and ratings to keep certain material out of the hands of children, because that's what they think. They think that it will turn them gay. It'll make them want to have sex. They are afraid of having to have hard conversations with their children. And so rather than have them, they will deny them that access to it. Why do you think the most banned books in this country are always queer books or books about racism and intolerance? Those are the books that are going to be impacted by this, because you are afraid of a teenager potentially reading a book about two adults having consensual sex in college. I mean, just look at the woman who tried to ban Beloved because it scared her kid who was a teenager, even though he was reading it in AP English.
As a parent, it's tough to catch everything. So when my son showed me his reading assignment, my heart sunk. It was some of the most explicit material you can imagine. I met with lawmakers. They couldn't believe what I was showing them. Their faces turned bright red with embarrassment. They passed bills requiring schools to notify parents when explicit content was assigned.
And one of the things that she did was use the fact that there is bestiality in the book as this shocking thing of like why it should be banned, while never acknowledging why it was there in the first place. That Toni Morrison was using bestiality for showing the dehumanizing realities for Black men who were enslaved and how they were denied human intimacy. That's not discussed. Just the sex act as a way of getting you galvanized and be like, without thinking about the larger context, wanting to put more barriers of access on books written for adults because a teenager or preteen might see them is not going to work, because A, kids are going to find whatever they want, and B, it will without a doubt lead to harming other sorts of diverse books. We know that. We know that. That's literally what happens. And if you've ever been in the manga section of a Barnes and Nobles or worked in one, you know that those plastic sheets, they are very, very easily disposed of. These kids are going to read it what they want to do. And for adults who are frustrated by what they see as an oversaturation of spice or sex in their book feeds, it is honestly up to you to diversify your own reading habits. There are so many like local bookstores that offer different opportunities. As someone who works in one, like the bookstores know different things. You have to look in different websites. Like if you go on Vulture in their book section, yes, there is some ACOTAR stuff, but there's also whole lists of other books to read that are coming out. Like, The Other Valley by Scott Alexander Howard, which I covered for the show I did for PBS. Like, there's no sex in this. And if people do decide that they only want to read smut or smutty books or like smutty fan fiction, that does not mean they have a porn addiction. Words mean things. And I feel like porn and sex addictions have become sort of like joke addictions that people just feel comfortable throwing around as an insult or like as a gotcha. But a porn addiction means you can't stop looking at porn or consuming it to the point where it interferes with every part of your daily life, because that's what an addiction is. Okay? According to WebMD, which I know is not always the best source, but this is pretty consistent from other things I saw, the signs of a porn addiction or over unhealthy porn usage, because it's not, porn addiction is not a actual, term in a diagnosis, but you know what I mean. Porn becomes a central part of your life. You stop doing things you really enjoy so you can see more of it. You neglect personal care. You lose interest in other activities. You become less interested in social encounters. It damages your relationships. You let go of other responsibilities. It affects your job or schoolwork. You're looking at it or watching it in places that aren't appropriate, like work or school. Your sex life starts to be unfulfilling. You have a craving for more. You can't stop looking at or watching porn even when you try. You can't quit even though you don't like it as much. You've been heavily looking at it or watching porn for 6 months or more. Nowhere in that does it say you make cringe content on TikTok. It doesn't say you know more about the Omegaverse than you do about your local elections, okay? There are boundary issues that we have seen come up on TikTok, especially with people interacting with minors and giving them spicy recs online. And that's obviously super gross and very weird, but that kind of weird boundary crossing happens all the time in these sort of like mixed media spaces. It happened in Twilight, and that's a series that doesn't have any spice in it. Like, people online, when they are in a place where there is no sense of fourth wall and there is not a high age barrier of entry in these fandom communities, will always lead to people who are somewhat not good about creating very clear boundaries between themselves and minors who are interacting with the same material. I remember that from when I was in certain fandoms when I was a teenager and there were adults in the same fandoms. Like, it is up to adults to make sure that they are behaving appropriately, period. And when it comes down to it, some folks are just annoying, have bad tastes, and are really loud with their really annoying bad tastes. Thankfully, you can ignore them. This push to make enjoying sex and books a moral failing feels like moms of liberty from the other side. The same anti-sex moral policing that does not help anyone, but allows some people to feel superior by standards that they invented. You are not protecting teenagers by policing what adults do in adult spaces with other consenting adults. Critique the works that you think are mediocre or not good, but stop trying to, out the purity ring people with your sort of like, is there nothing out without smut? I mean, read Babel, girl. Like, what are you talking about? Yellowface. Get on that RF Kwong, baby. Like, what are you talking about? And honestly, it's just anti-romance stuff being appropriated and used with a little bit of social justice sprinkled onto it to try and make it seem like there's actual depth to it. And to be clear, there are certainly people who just do not care for sex or romance because they feel like it distracts from like the larger plot things, and those are valid. There are also people who are ace and would like to see more ace representation in books, and to not have romance and sex always be like default experiences in other genres. Absolutely. There's also a big critique about how like romantasy, while it's an interesting concept, sometimes the world building is just not built. All of those amazing, great points. That is different from saying that that calling these things a porn addiction and critiquing them with the exact same save the children moral stance isn't potentially destructive. Not because you are coming in with ill intent, but because there's a lack of understanding of the personal responsibility that we need to have as people who read. And unfortunately, the internet loves to take real world issues and turn them into fuel to dunk on their rivals, to seem more intellectual, and it seems as though they are doing this whole community fan thing right. Which transitions very neatly into
Zuko!
the shipping part of the video. I'm gonna need to change my shirt. I gotta go back to what I know. I gotta go back to what the fuck I know. Okay, so when the live action Avatar: The Last Airbender show came out, I expected a lot of things to happen, but I didn't expect to be thrust back to being like 14, 15 years old, having the same fights about Zutara versus Kadang. And this time with the same Legend of Korra versus ATLA takes in a rotation that seems never fucking ending. I don't care if Aang was a bad dad. I don't want to argue if the crew is better than the gang. We know it's not. Okay? And while it did inspire me to start rewatching Avatar: The Last Airbender to put my feelings on Patreon, which, by the way, you should follow me on Patreon if you like my content. I'm basically kind of using my Patreon as a Substack now. It's really fun. I still found myself exhausted by how the main shipping discourse has not moved not an inch since I was a literal child, to the detriment of everyone. Avatar is one of the most popular and beloved series of all time. As divisive as Korra is, it will always be famous, and it has fans. I have, like, you can't see it right now, but if I were to pan up, I have Korrasami art on my wall. I have 2 pieces of it. The series has the kind of world building that opens itself up to all kinds of possibilities using the confirmed canon and not using canon. It just is like perfect. It is a great playground for many things, including fanon romances. For those who may not know, because times are a-changin', and I don't know who knows what. A fanon romance, fanon, is a relationship that is not canon. It is a fan canon. That means that they don't end up together in the end. Sometimes fanon romances can become more popular than the canon ones, but there is a clear what is the text and what is not the text. When it comes to Avatar: The Last Airbender, Aang marries Katara, they have 3 kids, happily ever after, cool. Right? That means anything that is Zutara or a non-Kadang ship that involves either Aang or Katara is purely from the minds of fans and lives in its own universe. Cool? Apparently not. Because rather than it just being like that, it has to be turned into a moral and ethical divide instead of just taste and narrative desire. I've seen really great videos about Kadang. I've outgrown my childish, like, things against it. Like, I get it. But to me, Kadang is boring because it is a slow burn that lasts the entire series. I talked about this on my TikTok, which I'm pretty fun there. If you want to follow me there, you can. And I get that they have a sweet friends to lovers friendship. I just think it's underdeveloped in a way that is not satisfactory in exploring to me why Katara would be into Aang. Not a good enough job for me. And to me, the show in general doesn't do a good job with romance anyway. And that's why, even though I don't hate Mai, I don't think she's an interesting character either. There isn't much there. There's little to no development about her relationship to Zuko before it happens. And then we just kind of have to go with it because it's there. Which, which is fine for those who like it and were open to it. I just feel like, for me, at the time where she was introduced, I'm like, I don't really know you. Then we never really got to know her any better. And then she just becomes Zuko's girlfriend rather than just being Zula's lackey. And, like, that's just not interesting to me. Like, I feel if Mai is going to say that she loves Zuko more than she fears Azula, then maybe Zuko should bring Mai up at any point in the series when she's not in the room. The only time we ever see Zuko talk about Mai is to Sokka during, like, the Boiling Rock 2-parter, and that's because she's gonna show up in the episode. The show itself did not do a good job for me of bringing things together. And as a result, I always liked Zutara as a potential relationship because of the parallels between the 2 characters, because I just, I also, like, read the text from, like, a dialogue of the waterbending scroll and totally thought I was gonna go a different direction.
I'll save you from the pirates.
I love how she was able to show empathy for Zuko, but then when he betrays her, she was like, I'ma end your life.
You make 1 step backward, 1 slip up, give me 1 reason to think you might hurt Aang, and you won't have to worry about your destiny anymore, because I'll make sure your destiny ends right then and there, permanently.
I love that for her. I love how once they become friends, they're quickly, like, ride or die for each other. Like, he asks her to be with him in the fight to Azula because he knows Katara got that dog in her. I like that he, like, had to earn her trust back. I like that their relationship was worked to get to a place where we could see Zuko would be willing to die for her. And yes, I know that the argument is that he would have done that for anyone, and I do think that's true. And it also matters that he was doing it for her, a person that was his enemies. It is a great enemies to friends story. Like, take relationship out of it. It's a great story to have. People say, like, oh, you only like it because you're shallow and delusional. And here's the thing. I'll take it. I'll take shallow and delusional. I'll take shallow because let me be frank with you. When I started watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, I'm 32. At the time of filming this, my birthday has just passed. My birthday was April 6th, so I'm officially 32 years old. When I started watching Avatar, I was like 14, 15 years old. And to me, the idea of 14-year-old Katara being with a 12-year-old bald-headed child, I was like, that's weird. Plus, you know, I'm a millennial, so Aang being bald-headed made me think of Caillou, which was very triggering. We all have ancestral beef with Caillou, so I couldn't deal with that. Shallow and delusional, I don't mind that as an insult. But now that we have to have social justice as well as a reason to make fun of a ship, it becomes this narrative that we are okay with imperialism and John Smith and Pocahontas stories and colonizer romances. And this is where it goes from being a antagonistic debate to like media literacy and explicit language for the sake of it. Especially because, to be quite frank, a lot of these conversations are very unserious in what they're actually trying to say, because it really ends up being about taste and how they feel about the ship. They think that we're annoying. Bet. Okay, we are. And I think what pushed me to put this section in this video is that I saw someone who tweeted this AI picture of an Israeli and Palestinian person holding hands with their flags that says, "This is what happens when you ship Zutara." As someone who has come on this platform and talked about imperialism, like my big sort of like transformation of this platform, this channel into like what it is today, was doing a video about cartoons and imperialism, right? I've talked about how the fighter ship probably shouldn't exist. I have called out how the settler colonialism in the comics is super problematic. How my biggest issue with The Legend of Korra is how it doesn't know how to handle any of the political matters it is bringing up, right? Why is it that people have more energy for discussing Zuko and Katara's relationship and what that implies than any of those other larger issues in this fucking series? If we're gonna talk about imperialism and colonization, let's get into it, girl. Let's go. If we want to get down with the fuckery in the series about how it treats these issues, let's go. But let's go beyond this superficial bullshit. Why is it the only time people care about Zuko's position as a colonizer by birth is if he's in romantic proximity to Katara? And only Katara. Mind you, Zuka, which is Zuko and Sokka, has become one of the most popular Zuko ships right now, which, you know, shout out to them, that we basically cousins. I'm not trying to give them any smoke, but like, there's no difference. It's the same thing, except it's MM. Zuko gets to be friends with the gang, gets to be Fire Lord, gets to be best friends with Aang, gets to have statues and land that his family helped colonize, and he gets to, you know, cook all that shit with the approval of the entire group. The entire group allows him to become Fire Lord. Yet all of a sudden, y'all put these moral quandaries onto Katara that do not exist in the text. You don't care about this when it comes to Jin, girl from the Earth Kingdom. Y'all don't care when it's her and Zuko. It's only this one. The Promise comics canonized, since y'all care about canon. If it's about canon, let's talk about it. The Promise comics canonized that Katara is okay with settler colonialism for the sake of her own future kids that she will have with Aang, because she sees it as an issue of dual citizenship and not an issue of colonialism and imperialism. Of those comics, which are canon. And if that's what you care about, whoop, there it is. So when people say that she wouldn't be Fire Lady because it's too close to the nation that took everything away from her, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. Not because I don't think that's a compelling argument, not because I don't understand the textual nuances of that. Simply because if we're talking about the canon, because what people use, the canon of this world don't stand on that kind of business. The canon of Avatar: The Last Airbender, as radical in certain ways as it is not that radical. Okay? Iroh is happily walking around free and chilling and owning property in a city that he war crimed for 600 days. So again, I totally respect and understand people who are uncomfortable with the relationship because of the subtext of it. I'm a Black woman. I'm a descendant of child slavery. I get it. I'm not against that discomfort. What I want is that if you're going to use it as a weapon against every shipper who ships Zutara, including and especially BIPOC ones, I hope that you're coming for the failures of the entire series on imperialism. I hope you're coming for the entire series and other ships that allow Zuko to be with people who you think he is the colonizer of. I'm not saying don't say it. I'm saying be consistent. Be consistent with that energy, because often y'all are not. And it's because there's not because at the end of the day, that's not really the point. The point is you don't like it. And so this is the best way you can be like, shut the fuck up. That's why people always bring up the John Smith Pocahontas comparison. And I'm just like, first of all, Matoka was a real person, you know, because they're bringing up to talk about the Disney movie. That was a real child whose entire life was appropriated into a Disney movie that has less historical accuracy than Anastasia. And you're comparing that, right, to a fandom ship between two characters who are the same age, pretty much like 2 years difference. And by the end of the series, they are allies and friends, one of whom almost died protecting the other, and then was subsequently saved by that other person.
I love you, but you are not serious people.
If we're going to be using language of social justice to have these larger media literacy conversations about shipping, be consistent. Be for real. And if you're not going to be consistent because the reality is you just don't fuck with it, be honest. Hate proudly. Be like, them bitches is annoying, I don't like them, shut the fuck up. And to be quite honest, I also understand that sometimes the shit can just be annoying, you know? Not all ship folk are kinfolk to me, okay? And I get that with like Raylo being super popular, with the way that enemies to lovers has risen up and taken over a lot of these fan bases, especially again with the algorithm. There's this need to like pathologize these ships. And again, my only issue with why this happens that's frustrating to me is because it's only heteronormative female male ones. The exact same issues with any MM or FF ship do not come up. You'll see the discourse for Zutara, none for Zuka. You'll see so much discourse with Dramini from the Turf books, but not for Drary, which is more popular. With pretty much the exact same issues. No discourse. Just vibing, just chilling. Rayla, well, you know, Rayla was bad. But I can't. But also that's because there's no alt. You know, unless there's a segment of like Kylo Poe shippers I don't know about. Okay, I'm not interested, but I will be curious. I'm open-minded. You know that about me. If it's written well, there's always potential to ship it. And at the end of the day, I just think I don't need to be told that me liking a ship I got into when I was literally 15 is a red flag. But if it is, I guess, like, you know, alert, alert, alert. I was 15 and I thought that the sad boy with the burn and the ponytail was papping.
Daddy, I love him!
And then I fell for his sister right after. So like, whatever. I'm fine. I'm fine. How all these subjects connect is through this way in which the way we consume content more than ever has eroded all ability for us to disagree about how we view art and media without turning it into a full-out war. And I'm talking about people who would ideally be in community with each other. I'm not talking about reaching across the aisle. Obviously, real substantial conversations are watered down constantly with bad viral takes that everyone responds to. Moments of just fandom glee about one thing get stitched by antis and they get turned into a back and forth that no one can follow or keep up with, but that the algorithm constantly wants you to engage in because it gets you money. I dated a Ken shipper, okay? I've dated people who don't ship what I ship. I have friends who don't ship what I ship. I don't care if Ken shippers touch about Zutara. That is your right. Because we are annoying. Because we are winning. We are winning the numbers game. But why can't I just not see it? Why isn't it easier to block things? Why isn't it easier for us to have tags and mutes and to just know not to interact with each other? Why do you need to tell me directly why you hate what I like? Or if you want to have a disagreement about it or disagree, why can't we do that nicely? Why does it have to be like, oh, you like imperialism now, bitch? Let's not go that far. If we want better media literacy, then we have to also be able to listen better. And to also realize that you don't have to engage in every little thing about what you like. You know, if your ship has already won the shipping wars canonically, do you really need to be concerned about what the losers in the fandom boat are saying? Okay? All my ships are canon in She-Ra and the Princess of Power, and I have not gone back to the fandom since, okay? Godspeed to the Catra Glimmer shippers, the Glimmer Adora shippers. I am rooting for you. As someone who's historically shipped fandom, I'm rooting for you on the other side. But me, My ships, Catradora and Intrepid and Glimbo, are canon, and I'm over here relaxing, okay? All my ships in the Owl House, canon. I'm chilling over here. The Gus and Hunter shippers who are mad about Willow and Hunter, I feel for you. I have empathy for you. I'm in the winning circle, minding my own business. Make your art. Make your fanfic. Live your life. Because it doesn't fucking matter. It's a show. Let's just call all of this what it really is, you know? It's hating. Okay? It's annoying to see shit you don't like pop off. If you think it's something that is beneath you and yet it's so popular you can't escape it when you're just trying to like live, this shit is annoying. When I was a teenager, I hated so many of the mediocre YA books that were so popular. I was a menace, okay? But I was also young, never been in love, never dated, was so frustrated with my own sense of self, you know? I was full of a lot of shit. I was full of shit, some might say. And as I've mellowed out, gotten older, my priorities have shifted. And what I want more than ever is to have fun, to enjoy things, to find a true sense of community in what I'm engaging with people my own age and around my age. And I like discussing media. I like engaging in discourse. I like knowing why people like things that I don't like and sharing things with people I do like. But it has to be done in good faith and respectfully. And if you're going to be a hater and you're not open to shit, then just be upfront about it. Don't make me work for it. If you know you're going to be a hater, don't make me try to help you. When you come into a fandom or you come into any community, maybe it's worth looking into what it was like beforehand or what people are into, you know? Like, when it comes to book talk, if the biggest problem in book talk right now is smut, you're lucky. Okay? When I was growing up, there was a lack of BIPOC people on covers. There were sexist tropes that were written as like pick-me girl feminism. Like, on top of just mediocre books getting to be popular, like, it was mediocre toxic shit. Now, we at least have mediocre gay brown books, okay? And right now there's like a TikTok thing that was happening where people were asking when fandom became so mean. And while it's always been mean if you are or a person of color or queer, to me, to wrap all this things up, I think the rise of Tumblr and your fave is problematic. Really created this desire to become the person with the cleanest ledger when it came to what you like. With the best moral standing with what you enjoyed. And that is a very boring and uninteresting way to move in the world, especially when your ability to understand those nuances begins and ends with being a hater, of using the ability to understand problematic material and problematic content and not using it to be a better thinker, to be a better observer, to sort of like inform others, but just to go like, that, because we may be dealing with a media literacy crisis for sure. That doesn't mean that your take is right.
I'm a flawed, experimenting person, and I will need a husband with a more forgiving disposition.
That was the video. I hope you enjoyed. It's something a little bit different, a little bit ranty with some structure. If you like, share, sub, and I will see you soon with an even better shirt.